Hey everyone, welcome to Meeple Bits. Thanks for joining me today. In today's how-to, we're going to tackle the game Terraforming Mars Ares Expedition. This game is actually very similar to its predecessor, Terraforming Mars, in all the right ways. A couple of things are streamlined, but to be very candid, there's also a lot of similarities and complexities similar to its brethren, Terraforming Mars. So with that, guys, join me as we go through this setup and how-to for the game Terraforming Mars Ares Expedition.
So before we begin, let's take a quick look at the components that will come out during the course of play. To begin, we have a lot of cubes. Here are the denomination cubes in gold 10, silver 5, and bronze 1. Color cubes for each player, and the 2 clear cubes for keeping track of the oxygen and the temperature. Next, we have project cards, corporation cards, phase cards, and a helper card. Next we have tiles, the ocean tiles, 2-sided, the forest tiles in 1 and 5 denominations, and of course the phase tiles. Here we have the main player board, as well as the main play board, which includes the TR track, oxygen track, and the heat track. On the player boards, we'll tell you the phases at the top, the different production and their values for your cubes. Along the bottom, we'll have the additional information on standard projects.
Let's take a deeper dive at the type of cards and their layout that are going to come out during the course of play. Here's a general project card, and all project cards are set up in the same way. In the upper left corner is going to be its cost, as well as any requirements in order to play this. So this fusion power has a cost of 7 mega credits, and additionally, 2 heat tags are required. It's also noted down at the bottom where it says, requires 2 heat tags. Tags are the icons here on the left side of each of the cards. In the lower left is going to be its additional ability. So this one, which would trigger in phase 4, which is the production phase. During the production phase, that player may draw a card. And in the lower right is the number of this card, 127, which you could use to do any sort of searches for any in-depth details. These cards are not listed within the main play instructions, so keep that in mind if you ever want additional details on any of the cards. Here are corporation cards, which indicate the setup and your ability during the course of the game. In the upper left is a type of tag that would be counted towards any sort of requirements, victory point conditions, or the like when adding up anything. In the upper right-hand corner indicates how many mega credits you begin the game with. In the middle will tell you any additional information, such as here on Ecoline, you start with 1 plant production. So instead of starting on the 0 track on your player board for plant production, you would start on the 1. And then at the bottom is the effect of the different corporations. Additionally, it'll tell you where these effects may be able to take place, as indicated by the number just above their iconography. Here we have phase cards. In the upper left of each of the phases indicate the phase number of which will be used to trigger that phase, the name of the phase at the top, and then in the middle of each card, their ability. All players will be able to use this ability during that phase. At the bottom, the bonus. The bonus is for any and all players who have selected to activate that phase. So if 2 players during the game chose the development phase, then both players would pay 3 less for the card they play during that phase. Now that we've seen all the components, let's go ahead and set up the game for play. In this 2-player game, start by having each player select a color cubes of their choice. So for this one, we'll use red and yellow. Next, put the main play board into the middle for all players to reach. Then, have each player put their cube one of their cubes onto the 5 location on the TR track on the main play board. Next, take the tiles for the different phases and put them around the edge of the board. Number 1 at the top, number 2 next to that, number 3, 4, and 5 right down the side. And lastly, take the 2 clear cubes, placing them all the way on the 0% of the oxygen track and of the temperature track, and the far most bottom positions in the purple zone. Next, set up an area with the 5 and 1 ocean tiles, as well as the currency of 10, 5, and 1, creating sort of a bank for both the forest tiles as well as the denomination cubes. Next, take the project cards with the brown background and create both a draw and discard pile. Keeping in mind that the discard pile always will additionally be face down when creating a discard. And lastly, for the main play area setup, take the ocean tiles, shuffle them as best as you can, and place them on each of the hex locations around the main play board, thus creating the pool of ocean tiles that will be randomly assigned, but when distributing them, all tiles that came with the game will be used. And now the main play area is set up, so let's go ahead and look at what the player area setup looks like. So for this video, please note that we are going to use the optional playmat that does not come with the game. So keep that in mind that this may not be included with your copy. But to set up the player area, now that all players have their color of choice, give all players a playmat, a main play board. Next, from the project deck, the one with the brown background, shuffle and deal 8 cards to each player. If this is your first game, the game does suggest that you take the 16 cards with the star icon in the lower right hand corner and deal 4 of those to each player, putting the remaining starred beginner cards into the discard pile, and then dealing out 4 additional cards to each player. But if not your first game, just shuffle everything in and deal 8 project cards to each player. These cards do not cost anything, and all players keep all 8 cards received. Next, deal each player 2 corporation cards with the blue sky background. Additionally, if it's your first playthrough, the game does suggest to take the starter cards with the black star in the lower right-hand corner and randomly deal 1 of those to each player, thus being their starter corporation. Otherwise, deal 2 to each player, have the player look at them, choosing 1 and discarding the other. As an advanced rule, the players may, before choosing a corporation, look at and discard any of their project cards and draw back up that same amount and then select their corporation. This is not the standard play, but more of an advanced play. Keep that in mind, but it is an option to use. Next, give each player 5 phase cards, phases 1 through 5. All players should receive all 5 phase cards. Putting them into their play area, putting their corporation also into their play area, and keeping any project cards into their hand. Next, per the corporation, set up your player board in accordance with whatever this says. Here, this corporation says that I will start with 51 mega credits. So in this case, I would take my 51 mega credits and put them into the area designated for your money. Then, unless your corporation indicates anything else, everyone does have a certain effect, but if this doesn't tell you to set up your player board in any other way, then take your color cubes, putting 1 in each of the 0 spaces of all the tracks. Mega credits, cards, forests, steel, and titanium. And with that, setup is complete and you're ready to begin the game. Now that setup is complete, let's take a quick look at the steps or the gameplay as we go through. Terraforming Mars Ares Expedition is played out over an indeterminate number of rounds. On each round, there's going to be a total of 3 steps. Step 1. The planning step. During the planning phase, each player is going to pick up their planning cards, or phase cards, deciding which of the actions they want to take, and simultaneously placing them face down, ready to be revealed. And then all players simultaneously, so if player 2 were to say pick research, and player 1 chose development, these would all be shown simultaneously. Players are not allowed to choose the same phase 2 turns in a row. So the player that chose development would keep this off to the side, and on the next turn would need to choose a phase that they do not currently have discarded. So let's say they played also then on their turn the production phase. So they would put this one face down, ready to be revealed. Then once all players were to reveal their phases, they would take this one, putting it back into their hand for use on their next turn. So in the planning phase, if player 1 chose production and player 2 chose research, you would flip over the tiles corresponding to those phases in the main play area, indicating that these are then the active phases to be resolved in the next step. Step 2. Resolving the phases of what you've planned to choose during that phase. So now it's time to resolve the phase. So if player 1 chose production and player 2 chose research, production and research become the active phases for this round. Each player is going to gain the production in accordance to production, but the player that activated it, player 1, will take an additional 4 mega credits. Once this has been fully resolved, then we're going to move into the next phase. They will be done in order, not player order, but phase order. Then research. All players will draw 2 cards and keep 1, but player 2 will pull up a total of 5 cards and keep 1. Then, once all the phases have been resolved, all players will then move into the next step of the round. And finally, step 3. And for step 3 of each round, the end step, very simply, all players are going to count up their cards. And if any players has greater than 10 cards in their hand, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, they would discard down to 10 cards in their hand. If I had, say, 11 cards, take a couple, I would need to discard 1. For any card discarded, that player would take 3 mega credits into their pool. Any active tokens up here would be flipped to their inactive side, preparing then to repeat the round for the next phase. So let's take a quick look at phase 1, the development phase. Phase step 1, development. Each player may play 1 green project card. As a bonus, the player who has activated this phase will pay 3 less mega credit for the card they play during this phase. So each player may play 1 green project card. They would take 1 green card from their hand, paying its cost, making sure that they meet any specific requirements, such as this card, which indicates that they'll go down the TR track 1. But they will pay its cost, placing it staggered so that really only the tags and the abilities are shown as you build out the cards across the play area. Once the mega credits have been paid, so in this case a total of 11, it becomes an active card to use and can be resolved if this ability happens in a later phase. So in this card here, during the production phase, which is phase 4, you'll be able to draw a card. So during that production phase, I'll be able to take one card. Now, phase 2, the construction phase. Phase 2, construction. Each player may play one blue card or one red card. If you are the player activating this phase, you may draw a card or play an additional blue or red card during this phase. So, going back into your hand, you may play a red card, paying its cost and meeting its requirements, or you may play a blue card from your hand, again, paying its cost and meeting its requirements. As always, cards with the lightning bolt symbol have an immediate action to resolve. So this one, you may play an additional card this phase. That card may be a green card, and you pay 2 mega credits less for the next card you play this phase. So if I were to say play this one into my hand, I would put it down into my red zone area of my player mat. Additionally, I get to draw another card or play, if I wanted to, another blue or red. But additionally, I would be able to resolve this action, thus giving me the ability to play even a green card this phase. Phase 3, the action phase. Phase 3, action phase. Each player activates any action effects and standard actions. If you are the player activating this phase, you may activate one additional action an additional time. What that means is that every player on this turn has the opportunity to activate any actions that their cards may indicate. So example, red player here may spend 1 mega credit to draw one card. So I might want to take 1 mega credit and draw up one card into my hand. Then I have the opportunity to activate an additional action another time, so I could do this one more time. I'll save my money for now. Each player then can do a standard action. Those standard actions being on your player board, of course, spending 20 mega credits for a forest, spending 14 mega credits to increase the temperature, spending 8 tree tokens for a forest, 8 heat tokens for a temperature increase, or 15 mega credits to flip an ocean tile. Additionally, if you have the ability to do one of these standard actions, you must do that standard action. Example, red player only has 7 heat cubes. They don't meet the minimum requirement for the 8, so they're not forced to increase the temperature here. However, they do have 13 total forest cubes, so they must convert 8 into a forest tile. So they would discard their 8 tokens and take up a forest tile, putting it into the forest area of their play mat. When resolving an action for an ocean tile, the player may choose any face-down ocean tile, flipping it to reveal the underside. So in this case, the player would collect its reward here, which is taking 1 project card and taking 1 forest token into their production area. And as always, when a player is flipping an ocean tile, they will move up on the TR track. If they are increasing the temperature, they move up on the TR track. Or if they're increasing the oxygen, they would move up on the TR track. And one important caveat is, if the production of any of these reaches their max level, players may still contribute to the oxygen or the temperature during that phase and collect the TR track bonus. The next round, any progress that would increase this, they would not go up on the TR track. Phase 4, the production phase. Phase 4, production. Each player gains heat, plants, and draw cards according to their production. They also gain mega credits equal to their production plus the TR track. So in this phase, what we're going to be doing is looking at our player board to determine where we are on each of these tracks to determine if we take any additional production. So for now, I'm still on the 0 space of each of these tracks, so there isn't anything additional that I would do. However, I do have a card here that says that during the production phase, I get to draw a card. Since the production phase has been activated, I would take one more card into my hand. If I'm the player that has played this for the phase, I gain 4 mega credits. So I started by default on the 5 on the TR track. So my 5 plus my current 0 for my player board track, I would take 5 mega credits into my hand or into my production, and I would gain an additional 4 mega credits, putting them also into my money pool.
And phase 5, the research phase.
Phase 5, research. All players draw 2 cards and keep 1. Additionally, if I'm the player that has activated this phase, draw an additional 3 cards and keep an additional 1 card. So what this looks like is, if I'm just activating, or if I'm just taking the phase because someone else activated it, I would draw 2 cards and keep one of those 2. If I'm one of the players that have activated this phase, then I'm actually going to draw up a total of 5 cards and choose which 2 to keep. So this is not a case where you would draw 2 and keep 1, and then draw an additional 3 and keep 1. You may draw 5 cards and choose 2 from that pool. The game will continue through those 3 phases: planning, executing, and then end step, until the endgame conditions are met. All ocean tiles are flipped. The oxygen reaches the topmost available position, and the temperature reaches the topmost available position. Once the third and final condition is met of those 3, the game ends immediately. There are no additional phases to be had. So, example, if that were to have happened during the action phase, but the production phase were the next one to be played, the production phase would not trigger because the game has ended on the action phase. Once the game is over, it's time for endgame scoring. So to begin, take where you are on your TR track as your beginning point. So that's 1 victory point for where you are on the TR track. Next, count any forest tokens that you've accumulated during the game. So this player has 6 forest tokens, and increase your score on the TR track by the number of forest tiles you have. And lastly, count up any victory points that might be visible on your cards that you've accumulated during the course of play. So red player here has 2 cards that give them additional victory points, so 3 additional victory points for the red player. And the player with the most victory points, or farthest on the TR track, is the winner. In the case of a tie, the tiebreaker is going to be the player that has the most resources in mega credits, heat, and plants. So you're going to then count up any of the tokens you have in your player board and determine if you have more than any other player with a tie. And that's Terraforming Mars Ares Expedition. So I'm going to go ahead and tear down the table and bring you guys my afterthoughts.
Hey everyone, welcome back. I hope you enjoyed that setup and how-to for the game Terraforming Mars Ares Expedition. So let's go ahead and dive into my thoughts about this one, starting with the components. So with this one, it was a Kickstarter, so I forget exactly what all was Kickstarter exclusive versus retail. However, I'm going to judge it based on the copy that I do have with its primary components, namely with the dual layer boards. So for starters, those dual layer boards, unlike Terraforming Mars, the original game that have these flimsy cards for player boards, these are really good, thick stock, well done, and with grooves so that your cubes stay in place. So right away, I'm already excited about the additional quality that they added into this game.
Additionally, the cubes themselves are more, I guess, translucent cubes for the currency and everything, and so they're better quality. Whereas again, in Terraforming Mars, they were essentially painted. So very quickly with Terraforming Mars, I got a lot of chipping away at the paint on the 10, 5, and 1 cubes. Whereas here, they're just those colors defaultly. So it's going to stand up the test of time a lot better. So very excited about that. The cards have a beautiful linen finish, and as you may have saw in the video, I did actually take the extra step and went ahead and ordered the player mats. More and more, I'm starting to enjoy the player mats for games just because of the level of organization that they bring, especially when you're playing a game that's heavy on the cards. And for all intents and purposes, yeah, there's a main board, there's a small player board, but at its core, it's a card game. So those are some really good things about the components of this one. They've also got shrink trays for organizing the currency as well as the ocean tiles and forest tiles. So really, I don't think I have anything negative to say about the quality of the components of this one. So thank you guys for taking the steps and the measures, both the quality of the components, the shrink trays for organization, as well as there's some additional organization cards to separate which are project cards versus where the phase cards go, where the everything else goes. So even the insert itself was thought out. So it's not like Terraforming Mars where it's a bunch of baggies in air. All right, enough about the components. Let's dive into the game. And there's a lot of similarities between Ares Expedition and Terraforming Mars. They've also done a good job of, I think, making the cards a little bit better. So example, printing the tags of the card on the side, super helpful. They're right there, very easy to spot and identify the different tag types of the cards. The iconography is still a little, I guess, clunky, especially as it comes to the temperature and the oxygen. It'll have like a highlighted border when it comes to if the temperature needs to be in the yellow or white zone or anything like that. And once you get used to it, it's fine. But at a glance, it took me a little minute. So some of the things that I really liked about Ares Expedition is that it was very similar to Terraforming Mars in all the right ways. You know, you got a great engine builder. You're building everything up, and where it then differs though is where they try to take away from the complexities of having so many choices on your turn by planning a phase and then everyone just doing that phase as it happens. So it kind of, was an attempt to help streamline everything that was going on. So in Terraforming Mars, and I'm going to make a lot of comparisons, obviously, in the base game, in the main game Terraforming Mars, on your turn, you've got a massive amount of decisions to make on the many things that you can or cannot do when taking your one or two actions on your turn as it comes around. Whereas here, as I said, you're just doing whatever the phase tells you you can do. And that level of planning and strategy is pretty cool. Some of the things that I necessarily didn't like or were a small annoyance to Ares Expedition is that for all the streamlining that they were attempting to do, I got to say that the iconography was not as clear and ever present in this game. So even when you're kind of trying to butt up the cards so that you can see what effects and actions are available for you to take, pretty much every time I was still referring to the verbiage or the wording on the card so that I could make sure that it's exactly what I wanted to do. Additionally, it's not very clear as to the wording of when you should increase your production. So we, in the first early playthroughs of the game, when we were doing those increases of production, we were increasing it for maybe something that said, when this triggers, you take additional production. So it doesn't explicitly say to increase the track, and it says actually to count the card. So that really bothered me that it wasn't very explicit on increasing the track on your player board, though it was relatively implied. So that was a pretty massive annoyance, though, to say the least. So why should you want to add Ares Expedition into your collection? Well, one, you love Terraforming Mars as much as anybody else. You like engine builders, you love good quality components, and you like a little bit additional streamline and slight variance from the main game. Reasons why you may not want to add Ares Expedition into your collection is because as much as it tries to streamline, it does still complicate things in some areas. So as heavy and in-depth as Terraforming Mars, regular is, Ares Expedition doesn't do a whole lot to alleviate some of that complexity as much as they try. So I guess that's going to do it for this video, guys. I really enjoyed Ares Expedition, and it's going to be really a toss-up as far as which engine builder to bring to the table. I may actually want to get Ares Expedition to the table a little bit more, only because of the organization of the box inherently and the really neat playmats that I got to help organize the play area. But otherwise, guys, that's going to do it for this one. If you have any questions about Ares Expedition, please leave a comment down below. Happy to answer them as best as I can. If you've enjoyed the video and you like the content, I do appreciate the support, everyone. So please feel free to leave a like and subscribe. And as always, thanks so much for watching.